Have you ever been the last one to leave the office? That feeling when the silence is so total. It's almost deafening. Now, imagine staying there all night. The 5 stories you're about to hear are from people who do just that. They're security guards, nurses, and custodians who have witnessed things that defy explanation. Things that only happen in the dead of night. If you've ever felt a chill run down your spine when you were alone, you're about to find out why. I was the overnight receptionist in a music complex that pretended to be a midtown law office from the outside. Frosted glass, polite brass lettering, empty after 6. But on the 8th floor, behind a locked button on the elevator panel, were rehearsal rooms and a small studio that supposedly never slept. The elevator could only come up if we sent it. A little key switch under the desk, a dated monitor showing the street entrance, the cab interior, and the landing. We had a ritual. Buzz the front door, watch them enter, wait for the cab to arrive, turn the key, press 8, listen to the motor surge like a held breath. No one rides up by accident. No one rides up alone. At 3:18 a.m., the street camera showed nobody. The cab camera showed nobody. Yet the motor coughed to life, and the floor indicator began to climb, glowing its way through numbers that should have been asleep. I looked at Jasper, the night tech, who shook his head without looking away from the screens. We didn't touch the key. The chime at our landing is gentle during the day. At night, it's surgical, a bright knife of sound that makes your spine stand up straight. It rang. The doors parted. Inside was the striped light and mirrored steel of an empty lift, and the mild hum of air conditioning that never reached the lobby. We didn't move. The doors didn't close. 5 seconds. 10. I said, "Sensors dirty." Jasper said nothing. The indicator stayed on 8. The cab air moved, barely, like breath on a cold spoon, and a tiny bead of condensation formed on the inside edge of the left door, slid, and left no smear. The doors should fail safe if anything breaks the beam. Sometimes they hang open if people stand in the way. Fidgeting. But there was no one. 20 seconds. The hum felt louder, though the speakers showed no signal. My ID lanyard turned against my chest as if air had moved, like someone had just stepped past, between us and the open cab. I swear there was a cool draft from the elevator into the lobby, not the other way around. Like the building exhaled. 30 seconds. And then the doors closed with the measured certainty of a decision. The indicator fell back through 7, 6, 5, and settled in L hole. I told myself it was a relay glitch. Jasper said nothing because his hands, big, quiet hands, were flat on the desk, and I think he didn't want to see them tremble. We watched the screen like we were waiting for a jump scare, but the cab sat docile, empty, back at the lobby. Later that week, a vocalist came late and joked about the diva elevator that won't close if you hold your breath the right way. I asked who told her that. "A drummer," she said. "He said you can test it with your palm. The air moves if you wait." She lifted her hand toward the metal, as if remembering, then laughed it off. There were 2 other times the cab arrived uncalled and opened on 8 The third time I asked Jasper to stand in the doorway to force it shut. Prove the sensor worked. He did, reluctantly, a big silhouette inside the frame. The doors tried, hesitated, and gave up. When he stepped back, they stayed open anyway, the beam unbroken, as if something else still occupied the threshold. We waited longer than felt reasonable for 2 adults. Finally, the doors slid together, and somewhere below, the motor sighed like someone letting go of a question. I transferred to day shift a month later. On my last night, at 3:18 a.m., the indicator climbed again, all by itself. I did something I'd never done. I walked to the cab. I stopped with my toes at the line and felt nothing. No heat, no fear, just a stillness that made my ears ring. In the mirrored steel, I saw only myself and the lobby behind me, and the tiny white of my breath on the door edge. The elevator waited. When I stepped back over the threshold to the lobby floor, the doors closed as if satisfied. Some buildings keep secrets in basements. Ours had one that preferred doorways. End-of-life duty is mostly listening. You keep the overhead dim, wipe the corner of the mouth, count breaths without counting. You talk about a time before monitors and buzzers to someone whose world is narrowing by the minute. You do not make the room argue with itself. I was assigned the night to keep company with a woman who had once been loud, if the staff gossip had any truth in it. The kind of loud that makes holiday shifts bearable. Years do what years do. That evening, she had the look of a place that winter visits early. The hallway clock made that dental tap sound each second, as if sanding down the dark. I felt it happen before I knew the word for it. The breath that goes out and doesn't return. I waited the respectful count and checked. Quiet as sleep, only without the waste of dreaming. I said her name once, and then I went still. You don't rush the last part. The lounge was down the hall where she used to sit in the mornings, near a window that faced the parking lot lamps. The chairs there are all the same navy fabric, with a stubborn pattern like rain on glass. If a person sits in the same place long enough, the cushion remembers. So do the staff. I called for the on-call and stepped to the doorway to wave in my colleagues. They hovered there, two sets of eyes refusing the bed, holding themselves in the hallway like it was a border. I said, "It's okay." It didn't move them. That's when the call light in the lounge came on. The lights were off in that room. No one had walked in. I could see the frame. The call panel on the wall glowed alive and began to pulse red. 3 slow beats, and then kept going as if a thumb held the button. The hallway clock's tick felt wrong suddenly, like it had lost its place. My colleagues muttered no, 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 and did not cross the imaginary line between the safety of doubt and the obligation of seeing. "She's visiting where she sat," I said without planning to. It felt too simple a sentence for the shape of the moment, but it was the only one the air allowed. I walked to the lounge. The carpet had been vacuumed an hour earlier. Those neat parallel lines that make night staff feel like they've ordered the universe a little. If someone had been there to press the button, their steps would have marred those lines. The pattern was undisturbed. The cushion where she liked to sit had the slight bowl of use. The call panel's red eye throbbed steady. The air at the chair's arm felt a degree cooler, the exact shape of a shoulder. I pressed cancel. The glow died obediently. When I turned back, the hallway felt wider somehow. My colleagues reached for the doorframe like sailors stepping onto a dock. "Why would it do that?" one whispered. As if a wall panel could choose. As if systems didn't learn the habits of houses the way people did. I finished the tasks the living ask of the dead. The call, the quiet, the paperwork that makes everything official and small. The on-call doctor arrived with the calm of a man who sleeps on commands. He signed, he nodded, he left. Hours later, during that gray window between late and early, I walked back to the lounge and stood by the chair. The red light didn't come again. The cushion looked like any cushion. I don't pretend to know anything about souls, but I know how people leave trails through rooms, and how rooms keep them. If there's a kindness to the world after this one, it might look like being allowed to sit in your place one more time while the lights are low and the clock forgets to count. The loading bay belonged to the factory, but also didn't. It was fenced off inside the larger space, a cage within a bigger cage, and it had its own clocks. Mine started at 4 a.m., long before anyone with chatter or authority showed up. Long before the sun figured out which windows to aim at. You learn every sound at that hour. The tiny scream of a pallet wheel. The too loud sneeze you pretend didn't happen. The building's lungs. On the morning I think about when I say I don't scare easy. I propped my phone against the box label to say I'd be 20 minutes late back to the dock because a trailer latch was sulking, and my headlamp made a little bright circle bounce over barcodes. My breath showed a faint white because it's colder in that bay. My fingers had learned to tear tape without thinking. They did it while I typed with my thumb. That's when something hissed exactly into my right ear. Not a steam bleed from the wall, not a snake in a cartoon. A close-mouthed human hiss, warm on the skin where it meets the jaw. A sound full of consonants without words. The kind someone uses when it isn't time for you to speak. I jumped sideways, and the world did that terrible double pan of headlamp beam as the light tried to catch up with the body wearing it. The taped box dragged off the pallet, thumped, and the bay took that sound and had the nerve to stay quiet after. Okay, I said to nothing, but my voice sounded like it belonged to someone who'd been up too many nights. Someone who'd left part of themselves in a different room. I spun again just to prove to the part of my brain that was having ideas that there was only fenced metal and concrete floor and the dark behind the cage. And then the air moved past my mouth the other way. Not like a draft, but like the space I occupied had decided to be claimed. My headlamp stuttered as if my forehead was trying to blink. A box label in front of me curled at one corner, as if a breath had found it more interesting than me. There are jokes about security cameras. You wave at them, flip them off, test the limits of HR's sense of humor. That hour, I suddenly wanted one to see me, to be an adult in the room. I stepped backward out through the chain gate and into the corridor like you might step out of a story you no longer agreed to tell. I waited outside in the car because cars feel like they're on your side. They smell like you. They face the same way you do. When Mateo arrived at 5:12, he knocked on the window with a knuckle that said, I was late for a thing Booth agreed not to be late for. I told him I felt sick. He said, from what? And I said, from nothing. He shrugged like men do when they approve of lying if it helps you work. I came back inside with someone else, footsteps beside mine. The bay was the bay again. The headlamp behaved for an audience. I told myself that at 4 a.m., a mouse and a man are acoustically identical until proven otherwise, that the warmth on my skin had been memory, that the label had peeled because glue is glue. I told myself the air moving the wrong way could be a truck door down the hall. 2 weeks later, the gate sensor, which doesn't care about stories, refused to let the sliding bars close for 3 full minutes. It said, obstruction, in a patient red blink. The floor between the rails was clean enough to eat off. Mateo shrugged and shoved the rails together with both hands until the mechanism gave up and latched. We didn't talk about it. Some places don't want apologies. They want witnesses. I still start at 4. I still love the quiet. I still flinch if someone breathes too close to my ear in a crowded place. And every time I press my mouth to the lip of a coffee cup, I think about how thin the air is between what we know and what waits to use it. It was an accident in the machine shop that everyone tells wrong, because the truth hurts to hold. The lathe caught him. No gore in the sentence, though the world supplies it if you let it. And he did what desperate animals do. He got himself free of a thing bigger than he was. And then he tried to crawl toward help. We found the handprints later on the fender of his truck, over the passenger door, on the building corner where the wind misbehaves. He almost made a path out of himself. He almost solved the maze. The men in the business next door saw him around 6. They were not bad men. They looked at a bloodied figure sitting under the gutter and told the story their morning wanted. Drunk, not ours. Nobody we recognize. The kind of problem kindness sometimes complicates. They went inside. Their clocked-in day began. Ours ended afterward. In investigations, you get diagrams, timestamps, grainy photos that turn a life into angles. They said it happened at 2:03 a.m. They said he exited at 2:22. They said he likely went outside because he believed his phone was in the truck. And they found his phone a foot away from the lathe, mute and unhelpful as a stone. You can hate a phone if you need somewhere to put your hands. We stood there at the place where his last decisions are now stains. You can't power wash out of yourself. And the shop door sensor chirped 3 times like it does when someone doesn't hurry through. The wind was wrong for drafts. The lane was empty. The sensor worked fine when we tested it later with a broom handle. I tell myself that doors remember urgency. That machinery keeps a little of our heat even after we leave. After he died, men who never cry found private places and disproved their reputations. We wore his name in black tape on our helmets because the world needs rituals as much as safety briefings. For months after, the sensor at 2:00 a.m. would chirp. Not every night, just often enough to keep the hour away. Sometimes the red light at the wall panel would catch, hold, and let go. The way a breath does when it doesn't trust the next one. I don't have a moral worth carving in metal. I don't pretend to find meaning where a messy cluster of bad timing sits. But there is a calculus none of us speak aloud. Something about the 2 hours between when he was seen and when we found him. About how recognition saves lives and strangers wreck it. The men next door apologized more times than language should be asked to carry. I believed them. I still wish their eyes had been trained to see a man before a problem. Now when we lock the shop at night, we prop the door wide and stand there breathing the same outside air for a minute. It's a nothing thing. A small correction. A way to teach a threshold what a human pace looks like. If the sensor chirps when nobody walks through, I nod to it like a foreman and say, We're watching. Maybe it's for us. Maybe it's for nothing. Maybe some places need the reminder that not all doors are for keeping the world out. Night shifts in home care teach you the geography of other people's silence. This one was easy on paper. Remodeled 3-bedroom, 1 client, permissions to sleep between checks, TV allowed at low volume, a house that smelled like new paint and soft soap. That first week felt like trying to learn a song in a different key. At 4:03 a.m. of the first night, the power went out. No storm, no transformer pop, just a clean fall into quiet that landed hard in my stomach. I'm not frightened of dark rooms. I carry voices for a living, but I could not make myself stand. Somewhere in the back of the house, a door slapped as if the air had been stolen from the hall. I waited until the lights came back as casually as they'd left. It took 1 minute, a long one. The bathroom I'm allowed to use sits at the end of a hallway that seems to lengthen if you look at it wrong. I began to avoid it unless nature bullied me. The walls were freshly painted a color with an aspirational name. The floor was wood that remembered footsteps. I told myself the memory belonged to people with names, not to houses that keep their own hours. Then the dreams began. Not the kind that apologize when you wake. I'd dream I was awake on the couch with the TV soft. An unhelpful documentary about glaciers whispering, "Educate yourself." And I would hear someone ask, very close, "Are you awake?" That polite version of intrusion that makes you feel like the rude one. Sometimes I couldn't move. Sometimes my legs cooperated, but the room did not. I'd walk the hallway slow, counting the squeaks like rosary beads. And in the back room, a rocking chair would reveal a figure that wasn't hostile so much as interested. Someone whose mouth smiled a little too long as they whispered something I could almost understand. Then I'd wake for real, air punched half out of me, the TV telling me about melt rates, and for one long second the whisper would still be in the room, like a commercial that didn't belong to the channel. When I finally asked my coworker if the house had a history, she shrugged the way people shrug at paperwork. 2 former residents had passed the previous year. Cabinets opened sometimes. The electrician wasn't worried about the outages because the smart meter liked to reset at weird hours. "I don't sleep on that side," she added, as if sharing a coupon code. I tried to be rational with the building. During shifts, I left 2 lights on and made a path of illumination from couch to hallway, like landing strips for a frightened pilot. I told the house out loud that I was just borrowing it, that I wasn't here to take anything away. On a Tuesday, the power tripped again at 4:02. The hallway door eased shut, and something cool stood very near the couch and asked, kindly, "Are you awake?" The TV standby light pulsed red, 3 beats, and held. I stood then. I walked the hall. The back room smelled faintly like dry flowers and an old library. The rocking chair didn't hold anyone. It moved once, a measure of breath, and was still. On the windowsill was a thin line of condensation, the kind you get when the inside air forgets which side it belongs to. The bathroom mirror had a half-moon fog at mouth height, as if someone had leaned in to check a smile. By the end of that month, I learned new rules. I keep a nightlight in the hallway that stays on battery during outages, and I say goodnight to the rooms before I try to sleep, the way you do with children who aren't actually there. I haven't stopped the dreams. I've only convinced them to wait their turn. The question still comes some nights, very near. Are you awake? And it no longer feels like a threat. It feels like a ritual this place performs with whoever keeps watch. A threshold looking for company. I don't know if the last 2 people to live here like to sit at the end of the hall and rock. I don't know if they believed houses should make room for the living by borrowing the dead's routines. I only know that some homes are careful with their after hours. They test the air for us. They keep the lights honest. They ask what we are owed and what we owe in return.